It is now my great pleasure to introduce Lee Bollinger, Columbia's 19th president and the Seth Low Professor of the university. As I thought about how to introduce Lee, I realized that I'm speaking to an audience who is already deeply familiar with the many extraordinary accomplishments of our president of over 20 years. I could highlight, for example, that he is one of the nation's foremost scholars on the First Amendment and a leader who fought and in 2003 won the battle to preserve affirmative action in higher education. But you probably already know that about Lee. His latest book, which you might not know because it was just published, A Legacy of Discrimination, is a brilliant piece of work. This is the third book Lee published in less than 2 years. Everyone who knows anything about Columbia also knows that thanks to Lee's visionary leadership, Columbia has flourished as one of the premier universities of the 21st century. Manhattanville is the manifestation of Lee's vision. It's a modern, stunning new campus that is Columbia's most ambitious expansion in more than 100 years. And it is no secret that Columbia is now recognized as a truly global institution because Lee was determined to make it one. And he did that by creating Columbia World Projects, the World Leaders Forum, the Global Centers, and those have deepened our work here at SIPA as well. And in the coming years, SIPA and Columbia Global will work even closer together. Indeed, since I've become dean, I have witnessed firsthand Lee's dedication to SIPA and its mission. He has given me and SIPA the resources, the support, freedom, and encouragement to launch what we call SIPA version 2.0. So, what is it about Lee that you might not know? Well, Bob saw in Lee someone who was always eager to seek advice and engage. And for that, Bob had tremendous amount of respect for Lee. In fact, the two of them had a meaningful and effective back channel for all sorts of Columbia-related concerns. And don't ask me how I know about this. But this should not surprise anyone, because these two men share an intense love and devotion for everything Columbia. And they share the fundamental philosophy that Columbia's brightest future depends on our ability to reach and engage with the world around our gates. You might also not know a funny fact, Columbia story. As it happens, I first shook Lee's hand almost 20 years ago. It was during my commencement ceremony when he handed me my undergraduate diploma. This was my last year as a Columbia student and his first year as president. The next time I shook Lee's hand was almost exactly a year ago in Bob's memorial service. Since then, in a very short period of time, he's become a mentor, a thought partner, and a dear friend. Now, after more than 2 decades as Columbia's president, Lee will be stepping down at the end of this academic year to focus again on teaching and research. For me, and for many others, it is almost inconceivable to imagine Columbia without Lee Bollinger at the helm. I take comfort in the fact that he will be around, and what he doesn't know yet is that he will be spending time with us here at SIPA too. Because there's just no way I'm letting him off the hook. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Columbia's president and a friend to us all, Lee C. Bollinger.
Thank you very much, Keren, for that lovely introduction. So I want to recognize members of the Jervis family, Bob's spouse, Kathy, daughter Alexa, and brother Stephen. Recognize Keren, acknowledge the great time of excitement that we're in. Secretary Clinton, how great it is to have you part of this community. Representatives from the Departments of State and Defense. So it's a great honor and privilege for me to be here with you and to celebrate Bob's life and legacy and to introduce our distinguished speaker for this portion of the day, Avril Haines. Bob was a gifted scholar and admired teacher, and I learned this at his memorial service, a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. His research has been instrumental in shaping and reshaping the field of international relations, particularly with regard to human psychology and issues of war and peace. Bob was widely known and admired outside the academy for his insights and contributions. Among his many roles, he chaired the Historical Review Panel for the Central Intelligence Agency for 10 years and served as an intelligence community associate. Which then brings me to the keynote speaker for this portion of the conference, Avril Haines. Avril has served as Director of National Intelligence, overseeing all intelligence agencies since January 2021. She was the first Biden nominee to be confirmed with a vote of 84-10 in the Senate, something that came as no surprise to anyone fortunate enough to have worked with her. Avril's distinguished career in all three branches of government, in and outside the intelligence community and in academia, is enormously impressive. Under the Obama administration, she served as Assistant to the President and Principal Deputy National Security Advisor, with duties that included leading the National Security Council's Deputies Committee. Prior to that, she was the Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency from 2013 to 2015. Before joining the Biden administration as Director of National Intelligence, she led the Transitions National Security and Foreign Policy Team and served as a member of the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. I first met Avril in the period following the end of the Obama administration. I had been told by a colleague I respect enormously that I should meet with Avril, that Avril was wondering what she might do next in life, and that Avril was the most intellectual policymaker she had ever encountered in government. That meeting followed. And at the end of the meeting, I invited Avril to join us at Columbia, something I have never done before based on a single conversation. I remember listening to Avril talk about a major issue the United States and other nations were confronting, and that was new and consequential, and with few precedents to guide us to coming up with a workable national and international framework. Avril's mind was supple, wide-ranging, questioning, and practical. I knew she was a great public servant, but I also saw how she could not just fit in, but truly participate as a full member of the academic world. I thought she would be great at Columbia, and she was. Soon she was leading the development of projects in the newest of our ventures we call the Fourth Purpose and Columbia World Projects, working with Nick Lemon and Ira Katz-Nelson. We didn't know exactly how to combine academic capacities with practical world problem solving, but we were smart enough to know that Avril could be our guide. She brought together experts and generalists with deep experience and good judgment to sift through ideas about what to do. She led the process in that special way she has of making everyone else feel they are leading it. And an institution was born. My last major project with Avril was asking her to write an essay for a book Jeff Stone and I conceived of to mark the 50th anniversary of the Pentagon Papers decision, and to make recommendations for today's quite different world about this vexing question: what should be the policy, legal, and constitutional framework for leaks of classified information to the press and for publication of that material by the press? We had a remarkable array of journalists, policymakers, and scholars writing essays. Avril's paper, which was one of the last to come in, but for good reasons, was what I, by then, had come to expect of her thinking. Such care in struggling with the problems, respectful of all sides in what is often a debate among self-righteous and overly confident participants. Humble and serious and open-minded and concrete in what she thought should happen. Jeff and I thought it clear her essay should lead the volume where it now stands. I have spoken about Avril's intellect and professional purpose, but I should also say there is no one in the world of greater personal warmth and capacity for friendship. With all these qualities, we benefited enormously, so much so that I have made it clear to Avril that Columbia will always be a home for her, for whenever she wishes to return. But it turns out that her qualities are great not only for an academic institution like Columbia, but also for being Director of National Intelligence, where her life is presently consumed by the gravest issues of our time. The truth is that we were oh so lucky to have her for these 4 years. To be sure, the country wasn't so lucky not to have her in that deeply troubled period. But we can all take comfort in knowing she's back where she belongs, so please join me in welcoming Avril Haines.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is really an incredible honor to be here. And Secretary Clinton and Jack and Ira, and President Bollinger, thank you. It is extraordinary, but I'm especially honored to be here today to deliver the annual Gabriel Silver Lecture, and to do so on behalf of the intelligence community in honor of Bob Jervis, whose life, work, and legacy is so dear to us personally and professionally. All of you know that Bob was a world-renowned international relations scholar and teacher, and I know you also know that he made significant contributions to the study of intelligence. And what you may not know is the extent of his work with the intelligence community over more than 40 years, and the fact that he is absolutely beloved by analysts and officers across the community, many of whom emailed me to tell me about their experiences with Bob over the years, knowing that I would be coming here to talk to you today about his work. Those who sent me notes reflected on his wisdom, on his humility, on his sense of humor, kindness, integrity, and of course, that he was a great sounding board for their work. He charmed all of us with his exuberance, the twinkle that he would get in his eye, when he saw a weakness in an argument, and his boundless intellectual curiosity. And they also talked about the fact that, as one officer noted, he respected the agency enough to criticize it forthrightly, fairly, and constructively. In many ways, Bob was a model for how the intelligence community can and should interact with academia. He unquestionably made us better. Bob's engagement with the IC started in the late 1970s when CIA's head of analysis invited Bob to serve as a scholar in residence. And this relationship led to Bob producing a post-mortem on CIA's assessment of Iran in the months leading up to the fall of the Shah in 1979. In this now declassified study, Bob flagged numerous concerns, including poor sourcing, status quo bias, the tyranny of expertise and politicization. And he went on to produce another review on one of our biggest intelligence failures, as the Secretary mentioned, the assessment of an active WMD program in Iraq in 2002. And in his book, Why Intelligence Fails, Bob pointed to logic flaws and tradecraft weaknesses that culminated in our analytic judgment call and is remembered by many who lived through that time as nuanced and thoughtful. And those efforts had a significant impact on our work, leading to changes in how we train our analysts today. Moreover, there are many other instances in which Bob's work affected our training. For example, Bob would talk about his book System Effects as his most important work, which received significant attention from our analysts. It was groundbreaking in applying complex adaptive systems theory to international relations and attempted to elucidate the challenges that arise when multiple actors and influences are interconnected, often resulting in unintended consequences and nonlinearities. His work again changed our approach to teaching advanced critical thinking. I believe that the closest thing we have to academia and government is the analytic community within the intelligence community. There's a bit more stress, no windows, fewer public publications, but still, we put a high value on independence of thought, freedom of speech, dialogue and debate. We value rigor, expertise, evidence-driven analysis. We are trying to understand and reflect on the world around us and to provide policymakers and operators with insights that will help them make better decisions. Bob respected and loved the community. However, he would be among the first to tell you that the classified nature and pressure of our work makes us especially susceptible to a number of cognitive and motivated biases, and consequently interactions with those outside of our community to test our hypotheses are absolutely critical to our successes. Long before most, Bob recognized the value and importance of a strong partnership between the intelligence community and academia. He encouraged the intelligence community to engage frequently with a broad range of experts outside of the government, and not just experts and scholars in academia, but also in the private sector, to ensure we had access to alternative perspectives, to identify our biases, to challenge our underlying assumptions. For decades, Bob gave generously of his time and insights, repeatedly reviewing our assessments, helping us to develop approaches, techniques to make our work better. And for decades, he was a trusted and valued interlocutor for multiple IC agencies. He regularly participated in conferences, as Karen noted, brainstorming sessions, often heated debates, helping us make sense of emerging dynamics and long-term trends, including contributing to such publications as our quadrennial Global Trends series. And in fact, in 2020, he helped the National Intelligence Council, the NIC, conceptualize the scenarios for the most recent Global Trends report. And despite his prominence and the busy schedule that came with it, Bob was always approachable, friendly, open to debates and discussion. He helped pressure test many of our analytic lines over the years, making us more confident in some of the work that we had done, and in other cases, less confident, pushing us to develop new scenarios and envision alternative possibilities. Bob stressed the importance, for example, of falsifiable claims, asking what would cause us to reconsider our views, and also stressed the importance of careful, disciplined, and explicit reasoning that revealed where any differences of opinion lie. He believed that adopting good social science methods would improve our chances of getting things right, but he also never suggested that doing this would be easy. In all cases, he understood the fact that intelligence analysts rarely have the luxury of time, do not always get to choose the questions they are answering. His pragmatism, humility, empathy were fundamental to his capacity to impact our work. And Bob also pushed us to declassify more information to better inform the American people during his decade of work with the CIA's Historical Review Panel, for example. He believed it was critical that we make as much information available as we could to allow the public to assess policy successes and failures in a broader context, to understand their complexity and hopefully help us make better decisions in the future. And for this reason, I think he would approve of our new transparency initiative, an effort that fundamentally seeks to promote an informed citizenry, greater accountability, and improved trust between the American people and the intelligence community. Through this initiative, we are proactively publishing unclassified and declassifying IC analytic work on our website, dni.gov, on some of our most vexing national security problems. And with the increasing importance of national security in our everyday lives, the more we can help to inform the public debate around such issues, the better. But by doing so, we also give the public, including academia, a chance to contest our thinking, draw to our attention questions or perspectives we have not considered, and learn from those outside of our traditional circles. At the same time, I'm hopeful that it gives the public a chance to observe the thoughtfulness and rigor with which we approach national security issues, while opening up our judgments to greater scrutiny and debate, making us, I hope, more attractive to diverse talent and expertise from across the country. And thus, Bob worked to improve our capacity for self-reflection, bring additional social science methods into analysis, promote engagement with outsiders who would test our assumptions, and promote an organizational culture better suited to counter our biases. And one would think that that would be enough, and yet his impact goes even further. Specifically, let me just give an example of how his scholarship has informed our work to great effect in the context of today's geopolitical competitive landscape, which is the topic of this conference. One of Bob's critical scholarly insights was the role that individual leaders' perceptions and formative experiences play in national decision-making. International relations had for some time focused primarily on the role of the state, with the view that the constraints of broader political, social, and economic forces significantly reduce the ability of any given individual to exert a meaningful influence on state-level decisions. As Professor McDermott, one of his prior students, wrote, prior to Jervis, most international relations theory would have argued that it would not have mattered if Adolf Hitler or Bill Clinton had been the leader of Germany in the 1930s. The assumption was that the outcomes would have been the same because the incentives and constraints on the international environment were seen as dispositive. But Bob's work, rooted in social psychology, recognized the importance of leaders, their perceptions and misperceptions, particularly in the context of crises, and how that could affect national decision-making. In fact, he opened up his book on why intelligence fails with a series of quotes, including one that seems especially relevant today. We missed the Soviet decision to put missiles into Cuba because we could not believe that Khrushchev would make such a mistake. This was said by Sherman Kent, a Yale University professor of history, who during World War II and through 17 years of the Cold War served at the CIA, and after whom the Kent School for Intelligence Analysis is named. The quote encapsulates one of the primary pitfalls of the old way of evaluating foreign decision-making, a clear bias towards rational actor theory, with a hefty dose of mirror imaging. Bob was telling us that our own biases kept us from understanding the actual perceptions and motivations of our adversaries. Khrushchev was making a mistake only from the viewpoint of an American. If we had taken that approach in the context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we would never have predicted the tragic and illegal large-scale invasion of Ukraine that the IC warned of in the fall of 2021. And as we told the world that President Putin was preparing for a large-scale invasion into Ukraine, we repeatedly encountered skepticism based on the perception that this would be a terrible mistake for Russia, and consequently Putin, as a rational actor, would not do it. While such a reaction was understandable, the insight the analyst provided was that from Putin's perspective, it made sense. He had long lamented the breakup of the Soviet Union, which he calls the greatest tragedy of the 20th century, and for some time wanted to restore Russia to what he perceives as its former glory. In his mind, Ukraine has special significance given its cultural and historical bonds to Russia, and he does not want to be known as the Russian leader who lost Ukraine. Yet Ukraine was moving, clearly, further and further away from Russia and slowly deepening its engagement with the West and with NATO. And President Putin perceived Ukraine's military as getting increasingly stronger with assistance from the West and was of the view that the Minsk agreement was effectively dead, in part because the political process associated with its implementation through the Normandy format was, again, in his view, incapable of delivering Ukrainian compliance in accordance with his demands. And thus, having exhausted political possibilities in his view, military action would be the best remaining option to prevent greater Ukrainian integration with the West, which he believed to be a significant threat to Russia's national security. Furthermore, given the trend lines, it would only get more difficult to effect a military option over time. Putin would, of course, know that Europe and the United States would react to such an invasion, including through sanctions, but he thought he could conduct the military offensive quickly, would be welcomed by most Ukrainians, and that he would be better at maintaining his resolve in the face of sanctions than Europe would be. And he knew he had high reserves at the time, a strong national wealth fund, some of the strongest economic indicators in almost a decade, a few years before his next election. And with high energy prices, he likely thought that it would make it harder for Europe to join the United States in issuing significant sanctions that would also carry a cost for Europe's domestic economies. In short, the IC took Bob's lessons to heart and strove to see the world through Putin's eyes, and not through the eyes of an American standing in a different place. This lesson will be equally important to carry through into our analysis with respect to China. In fact, to guard against mirror imaging, we work with experts across a series of fields, from anthropology to sociology to political psychology, to help us better understand the drivers of foreign decision-making. We use structured analytic techniques to help us better take into account the perceptions and views of the adversary and dampen the effects of our own biases. Techniques like formal red teaming help us emulate adversary thinking, and gaming exercises offer an opportunity to test foreign decision-making under stressful conditions. That teamwork, pairing our outside expertise with internal intelligence analysis, allowed our analysts to call Putin's decision to invade long before it looked obvious or inevitable, because it made sense to him. At that point, many people who claim they understood Russia and Putin were still talking about what a mistake it would be because it made so little sense to them. We will, of course, continue to make mistakes, but we strive to learn the lessons that allow us to preserve and advance what those like Bob and others in and out of the community have struggled to learn and apply over the years. I hope Bob would be proud of our work on Ukraine, even as I am confident he would also point out how we could continue to get better and the things that we might have gotten wrong. But that is, in fact, part of the joy of the partnership between our institutions, which help organize our learning to greater effect for the future. In sum, Bob's work has had an enduring impact on the intelligence community, including on the way we think about the business of intelligence and the way we go about pursuing and in conveying it. But above all, I cannot tell you how grateful all of us are to have had the opportunity to work with Bob. He was a genuinely wonderful human being who exemplified the rigorous critical thinking and essential collaboration that is so crucial to our work and service to the country. And I just could not be more honored to have a chance to do him some honor. Thank you so much.